Yes, we are here to talk about that project that we've been working on for a few months now, using diaries in the EFL classroom. So we've been doing that here at OHC, and I've also done it in previous work as well. So we started talking about it a good few months ago now, earlier in the year, and decided to get going, and kind of eventually I cajoled you into doing this talk with me about it. So just a quick question. Does anyone in this room actually keep a diary or a journal at the moment? Yeah. Okay, good. Has anyone done it in the past as a teenager? Yeah, of course. Okay, good. Does anyone keep a teaching journal? Whoa, self-training is okay, that's accepted. Yeah. I know, of course, during my Delta, I diligently kept one so I could do my reflection, and it was great. And then after Delta, sorry Danny, after Delta, bit by bit, I just stopped writing in it, and it's still there to be picked up. So when we think about diaries, though, we're not thinking here about learner diaries or about teaching diaries. We're talking about diaries, like journals. And some of us might be thinking of the kind of journal stuff like this, those inner thoughts that we might have. And secrets. Again, we weren't necessarily expecting our our students to write about these, although we did have some pleasant, interesting surprises along the way. Some of them more mundane, let's say. Right, so first let me talk a little bit about how, I should turn this off actually, so we wanted to talk about why we wanted to do it, really.
Yeah, why did we decide to do diaries? Well, for several reasons. Firstly, we wanted to see if there would be any improvement in the students' writing fluency. So both in terms of the natural rhythm and flow of their writing, but also specifically their handwriting fluency. Because I'm sure a lot of us have noticed that a lot of the students don't really write by hand these days. They're always on their phones, so we wanted to see how writing a regular diary would impact on their handwriting fluency. Language, of course. The diary is often written in the past tense, so with their use of past tenses, get any better use of prepositions, vocabulary maybe, and we wanted to see if there'd be any transfer to their speaking skills, because a diary is often the kind of things we might talk about in real life, like how we got to work, what we did this morning, what we did after school, so we wanted to see if that would then noticeably transfer to the speaking, which we both noticed it did. Also, because they're doing something regularly, you get to have that individual time with the student, which doesn't happen that often, and you get to notice things that individuals are doing well or maybe not so well, and you get to really focus in on those personal aspects of their writing. And it's the very nature of the diary is repetitive, you're doing it every day, you're writing about similar things, and how often do we actually get students to rewrite the exact same essay? Exactly the same. Often we give them different topics and things, so with the diaries they are writing about brushing their teeth and getting the bus every day, but hopefully they're doing it a bit better each time. And through, both of us kind of tried boarding emergent language while they were talking about their weekends or their day, and trying to exploit that and encourage them to use more complex language, maybe upgrading here and there where appropriate, and trying to encourage them to maybe extend, say things in a different way, be more descriptive. Having said that, we were both really aware that diary writing might not be for everyone. Maybe they don't want to tell you what they've been doing. Some students just don't like writing full stop. So we wanted to leave this space, as Barton and Walton point out, for them to be creative if they want to, but also to write about mundane activities like brushing their teeth and having a shower, both of which are equally valuable, we think.
And there's a lot of brushing teeth and having showers.
Yeah. At least we know that hygiene.
That's true. Up to twice a day, some of them, yeah. Okay, so we wanted to. We've kind of done this in different ways. We've approached it in different ways from each other, but we've also experimented ourselves with doing it different ways. So one of the ways I've done it in class is to, very common question that we would ask lots of people: what did you get up to this weekend? What did you get up to yesterday? Here we have students that we see every day, so we'll have the same class for at least a week, several weeks sometimes. So it's that repetitive, what did you do yesterday, what did you explore? So I'd get them to speak in small groups, and as they were speaking, I would be boarding the emergent language, the interesting language, things that they were struggling to say. And then it was kind of this, the exploration, as I've put here, it's kind of as appropriate, because there might be something very, very individual that only one student really needs to know, but then there'll be other things that I felt, oh, actually, that's a really nice piece of language that would be useful for everyone, especially if a group didn't understand what was happening in the conversation. And then I got them to write the diary in class, and gave them quite a strict timeline. You know, I'd say, we're only going to do this for 5, maximum 10 minutes, and that's going on to that kind of write-in fluency. They weren't to think too much about what they were writing. Well, that's not the right way of phrasing that, is it? They should be thinking about what they're writing, but not panicking and overthinking it. It's getting into that fluency. And then, again, telling them, okay, now it's time to stop. You're not allowed to add any more, but you have 1 minute to read what you've written, whether it's 2 sentences or a whole, little passage. And I was quite limited. You'll see some pictures earlier on about, I gave them certain pages so that I wouldn't get reams and reams of writing. I gave them, this is how much you've got. Because I have a life and can't be marking all of it. Then I would be taking it home, because I don't have that much of a life, and marking it at home or here, and obviously doing some feedback, which we'll talk about, and repeating it the next day in this way. Another way that I've done is to give them a model. Maybe a model that's something that I've done, could be real, could be fake, of something. Maybe explore the language in that written model. Perhaps I've gone from a speaking model to a writing model. And then we've explored certain features in there depending on the level. So it could be whatever, it could be the past tense or the future tense, whatever I've decided to focus on. And then they take the diary home as their homework. They write it at home, so a bit more time to think about it. And then, obviously this only really works when I've had smaller classes, or perhaps when I've asked them to do diaries every other day and not every day. I've marked it during the class or during the breaks that we've had and given it back to them and repeated it the next day.
This is an example.
Yeah, so this is an example from earlier on.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I have got a big question to ask about style of writing for a diary. Would that come later?
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Absolutely. So just to give you a model, this is one that I've done in the last couple of weeks with my elementary class. So there you go, it's a typical model. Obviously I think you can see this student has ticked off all the past simple tenses. It's elementary, so we're doing that. We've looked at positives, we've looked at negatives, but I've also upgraded the language a little bit and used some past progressive or continuous there. Just add that. And hopefully they've noticed those things and this student has tried to use them in the writing. We'll show you some more models a little bit later. We'll come to that as well.
Yes, and I really think that Simon's way of giving them a limit is really useful, because I didn't do that. So I had a range of things ranging from 2 sentences to an essay, both of which aren't ideal. So I think it's really good to give them that guideline, which I would now start doing, I think. So I did it slightly differently to Simon. I did it as a weekly thing, as like a weekend diary. My thinking behind that was they've got 2 days to mull it over. I said, sort of go away over the weekend, make notes about what you're doing, think about how you would say those things, and then on Sunday night, sit down and write about your weekend. And hopefully they've got quite a lot to say. They're here in London for a short period of time, a lot of the students, so they'll be doing stuff over the weekend. I would take it in on the Monday, check it, hand it back as quickly as possible, and they do the same thing the following Friday. As a kind of extension of that, sometimes I've done it this way where I set it on the Friday in the same way, but then on the Monday, hopefully they will have done their diary, and they get together in groups and I ask them, as I'm sure a lot of us do on a Monday, what did you get up to this weekend? And I give them the option to use the diary as a prompt. They have it in front of them to help with their fluency. They can glance at it for ideas, if they get stuck. But that's an option. They don't have to do that. They can just speak freely if they want to. And I would monitor while they were speaking and maybe notice any issues with pronunciation. Maybe they've written it but they don't know how to say it. Any useful language that I think is good to share with the class, or any errors that I think should be noted or worked on. Then give them a little bit of time to look again at their diary and perhaps self-correct, as Simon did in his model. Take it, check it, write it, give it back, repeat. And this is something I tried recently. On Friday, a couple of weeks ago, I wanted to know what they were doing at the weekend. So I set them a speaking task, what do you have planned for, tell your partner what you have planned. Then I monitored, boarded any good emergent stuff, upgraded it maybe, corrected any errors. Then they could take that away, mull it over the weekend and perhaps use it as appropriate in their diary. So they've got a bit more input and then the time to think about it and think about how to use it. The rest is the same, yeah.
So, of course, whichever method that we have used, we're getting quite a large amount, depending on the size of class and how much they're writing and their level of written work. And we have to think about how we're going to do feedback. We're not going to concentrate on this too much, because obviously there's a lot to be said about how to do written feedback. But we'll show you just a couple of things that we did do, because we tried a few methods. So one of them is very simply, we highlighted the mistakes, and we corrected them. Okay, so here's an example here again from something fairly recently, earlier this year. So it's just underlining something that's wrong and writing the correction, deleting things that shouldn't be there, maybe upgrading the language to something that feels more natural to me, and I'll come back to that in a second. So it could be spelling, it could be prepositions, etc. Okay.
Another thing we've both tried in the past but sort of abandoned is the correction code, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. All these symbols, they vary, don't they, the symbols that are used. We found that it was a bit confusing for the students. They didn't really know what it meant, and because we have continuous enrolment year, we spent a lot of time explaining what the code meant, which we found was a bit of a waste of time. And also, a lot of the errors we couldn't really categorise. Is that grammar? Is it vocab? It's just wrong. So you wouldn't tell the students that it's wrong. But yes, so we both decided that is perhaps not the best way for this, and also we don't necessarily want to hone in on this is grammar or this is lexis or whatever, because it's a communicative task. So abandon that. And something I've also done is, instead of using the code, just underline the errors and number them, and then give it to the student and say, look where the errors are, think about how to change that, and then I'll give them the answer key on the back, my suggestions, my corrections, so they can go away by themselves. It's very like self-study. So they can check for themselves, and I've definitely found this useful with big classes because you don't necessarily have that time to do one-to-one explanations with everybody. So they can then ask me later if there's something they don't understand my key.
And I think from this as well, something that we've started doing and I will be doing when I'm doing this in the future, there's a lot of doing in that sentence, is kind of explain to students, especially at a higher level. At lower levels, it's easier to say like, this is, in so many words, this is wrong, this is right. But as they get to higher levels, there are certain things that were being used that we thought, it's correct, it's grammatically correct, it reads okay as a sentence, but it's not how I would say it. There's something not right here. We were thinking about words like furthermore.
Whereupon. One of my students used, I went to the National Gallery, whereupon I saw a beautiful painting, which is great, it's correct. But would you say it? Would anybody use the word whereupon?
So we've sort of started using this, you said, but I would probably say this kind of thing. So it's upgrading, but not telling them this is wrong, this is right. Just it sounds more natural to me in that kind of way. But however we've done feedback, yeah, it's the Scott Thornby quote, because it's an EFL presentation, it has to be here. So whatever it was supposed to be that individual feedback. And we're giving it to each person, whoever's doing the writing, we're giving them direct feedback. And he mentioned something about being at the point of need. Now we understand that to be like, they need this word, we give it to them, they use it, it's great. But this is kind of retrospective point of need, if you like, because of the nature, Kat's mentioned, of this cyclical nature of repetitive writing about the same things, daily activities. If you can help them say something that is not, that they need to say, and they'll say it again and again, by doing it once, hopefully the next time they get a bit better, and the next time, and then it becomes a bit more natural. So that's the retrospective point of need. And again, it's about pitching it at maybe slightly higher level so that they're pushing themselves every time in their writing, and then hopefully transferred into their speaking as well.
Yeah, so we talked about the repetitive nature of it, they're practicing well, hopefully they should get a bit better each time. But it's constant progress. It's they're adding to things, they're changing things, they're elaborating, but there's not this sort of end goal of perfection, because it's never ending. Language is, you can always improve, which you'll notice in some of the examples we have, the student diaries. They're getting better, but there's still things they need to work on, which is natural and normal. So yeah, there's no expectation of an ending, which a lot of students sometimes think, no, I've seen this grammar before, so I've done it, finished, present perfect. But it doesn't end, and that's what we wanted to focus on with.
Or indeed in the writing as well. When you finished an essay, okay, that essay's done. What now?
Yeah.
I'm not going to write it again, that's done. Let's do the next topic, the next essay. This is a process, it's going on and on and on and on. So results, we need to tell you a little bit about what we found. Does everyone have a handout, just to check everyone's got one near them or around them? Okay, I've made a rookie error. Don't look at your handouts yet. We'll ask you to do that in a second. Just checking you had it. So, first of all, we want to focus on the board here. This is a little extract from Mohammed from Saudi Arabia, elementary. And I just want you to think yet, not discussion time is coming, just have a think to yourself. What was Mohammed trying to say, and how well did he convey his message to the reader? That's the teacher, okay? And then I also want you to think, considering his elementary level, if he had said this sentence or written it to another elementary student, what would they have understood and how much would they have understood? So just have a look and think. Okay. There's some stuff that needs improvement here, right? Let's go straight with the, we with a friend, my friend and I. But look, some nice stuff. Not only the collocation of go seeing, but he's using past tense correctly. And what did they go and see? Big Pan, of course. That big famous Big Pan that we have in there. But that's kind of connecting to what we mentioned earlier about this connection between speaking, pronunciation and writing, yes? He's from Saudi Arabia, so that's that classic plosive kind of B, P, getting those wrong, and E and A sound, getting those wrong. So hopefully by correcting that once, he will see, oh, it's Big Ben, okay. Right, so we're going to ask you the same questions now about Shintaro and Zarshed. What, in each case, you've got them on your handout, they're the top ones, so the short extracts, not the longer ones. The short extracts. Have a chat with the people next to you and around you. Again, what do you think each were trying to say? How well were they getting their message across? And what would their fellow classmates, again, elementary level at this point, what would they have made of this utterance or written piece? Okay? Just give you a few minutes to talk to each other about this.
Yes, I have a line. That's very much it's a grammar really that's pretty good. Yeah.
That's pretty mild, and then you say things like dentist.
I'm assuming this came from the 10-minute movie last then. It looks like
consider their level here. These are elementary students. Think about what they're able to convey, what they're doing. Would you say they're doing well or not?
Very well.
Well done. It was really nice here. Obviously, we're very professional, so the majority of people are picking out all the things they're doing well. Yes, there are things still going wrong here, of course, but there's a lot of good stuff here. I mean, there's collocations I wouldn't expect from an elementary meeting, like have a lie-in, have a lie-in, or have a nap. I can tell they were both my students. Lots of sleep talk.
And we shared the same students, and they were using have a lie-in a lot. So
I just hope that 8th of April was not a school day, because in this way. But there's some good stuff here. You were saying what?
Yeah, I mean, caught in traffic jam. Okay, the spelling is not right. He's not used the article, but traffic jam, great vocabulary. Caught in traffic jam is the correct collocation. So I don't necessarily think other elementary students would understand that. Jam, the bigger thing he means for your toast. So
I think Matthew was pointing out as well, here on the 23rd of April, this the use of roughly. Yes. Not a very elementary word. Right. Thank you. But these kind of like approximations, these are really nice to put in there. They're very natural, they're good in speech, they're good in written form as well.
This gentleman here pointed out the Korean restaurant.
We're going to be coming back to that one. Yeah, it's a favourite. You liked my comment on that one, I think. Again, we're having a little discussion here, this kind of going to the gym, and then what do? You work out, phrasal verbs being used quite naturally. Work out hard, is that how you would say that?
Well, we were thinking there might be two meanings. Was he pushed, so it's a really hard workout, or was he pushed himself?
Yeah, and that's really interesting. Now, I happen to know, as I was discussing with you, that Zarshed has a personal trainer that he sees once or twice a week. So I don't know if he's picked up something from his personal trainer there, like you worked out hard tonight. I don't know, but it works.
Sharita had an interesting point. She said that they often say work hard, That's an existing collocation they use a lot.
Yeah.
So perhaps he's transferring
Yes.
that to work out
Absolutely.
hard. Yeah.
But I think also for him, this kind of dropping off and picking up, this is very important language for Zarshed because he has a job here where he picks up and drops off packages all day long when he's not here. So he really needs that language, and he's also thought, oh, okay, if I do it with packages, then I'd probably do it with my cousin as well. You know, it works well, right? It works out quite well. Good, more confirmation. So,
I came back home.
yes.
He wasn't saying that in the beginning. He was saying, I back to home,
Yeah.
which is, maybe you've noticed, a common error. But now he's using it correctly. So there's definitely an improvement.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. And speaking of improvement, so we wanted to look. We've got them on the handout as well, but some bigger things from Zarshed. So this is something from earlier this year, obviously. Just have a look at it for a second. The meaning's kind of clear, right? There's a meaning, but I mean, a couple of months later, he's able to write this. Again, on the handout, if you can't see it here. So things again, it's that cyclical nature that Kat was talking about earlier. There's still improvement here, but he's thinking about stuff. He's kind of heard in class that he should probably say to buy, the infinitive of purpose, but he's still going to use for as well, because why not?
Just in case two's not right.
Yeah. So just so we definitely know that he did it for to do this. But you'll also notice as well, and if you read more of his things, he didn't use any breakup of sentences. It was just one long track, no full stops. But look, 2 sentences! Hey. Getting there, okay? And we also notice that this one as well. This is a classic, the use of the word after. After the school, I go to this, after I do this. And obviously that's quite a complicated one because just using after sometimes reverses the order of what you did something, right? So they used a lot of after that, but he's got it right, and before as well. You know, before I came home, I bought pizza. So he's using those sequencing devices quite well, I think. So it's nice stuff to work on, and of course spelling, office, right? It's those simple things happening as well. Now we can't say that this is just because he was writing diaries. There's a big gap between February 27th and April 25th. He studies 20 hours a week here at OHC, and he's actually a really good student. He started at beginner, and I think he's an intermediate at the moment, is that
He's
right?
taking IELTS soon.
He's on his way to IELTS and stuff. We're going to be talking a lot more about him.
Works hard.
Yes. So we're not saying it's all to do with the diary, but we think it's maybe connected.
So Zarshed again. So here on the 1st of March, it makes sense, we understand it, but it's quite simple. Simple sentences. There's no real detail there. He's not really attempted to give us any description, and he hasn't really connected sentences. But then if you look here, he's really made an attempt to be descriptive. He's using more adjectives. He's connecting chunks with prepositions. With my friends, we ate delicious Arabic food for dinner, and that's something we would say is a very, very natural way of describing what he did. So it's nice, like as Simon said, we can't say it's just because of the diaries, but gives us a clear comparison for us and for the students. It's quite motivating for him to see that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So of course we wanted to talk about what we think of this. Obviously we're fairly positive, otherwise we probably wouldn't be doing this presentation. We wasted months, so thanks for coming. But we've broken into different sections. So in terms of language, I think you've got some examples in front of you, and some of you are noticing this. So spelling improved, office, things like that. Big Man to Big Ben. And that's connected to the speaking. In some ways we think there's been some improvement in some of the speaking, not just with certain words, but also because when we ask them, what did you do yesterday, they've got more to say, because maybe they've already written a diary, or they know that they have to write a diary, so they've thought about what they're going to say. Okay, other than that, what did you do? Nothing. Kind of response. Yeah, they really thought about it. Obviously past tenses. The majority of people, as Kat mentioned earlier, are going to be writing in past tense because it's what did you get up to. Although I have flipped this and done it into the future and done future diaries, and then from there you can do all sorts of things. Like, well, I was planning to do this, but in the end I did this. And you can do that with much lower levels than you'd think. Prepositions that we've mentioned there, using them, and I would include here phrasal verbs or whatever you want to categorise those as. Sequencing devices, like we talked about before, after, follow, not following that. That's not a good one for a diary, really, is it? And then maybe some language beyond classmate comprehension, and this is where it comes back to that individual feedback. So if a classmate at elementary level that's been in the class for a few weeks and has learned some of this nice vocabulary, on Monday morning says to a brand new student, oh, I went to an Arabic restaurant, I smoked some hookah, I worked out really hard, and then I dropped off my cousin at the airport. The person will be like, right? Breakdown of communication in this sense. So we think because they're writing it and they know that they're writing to us, they're able to push themselves beyond, and it's helping them to improve, and we can help push them forward as well.
And other benefits we thought of, aside from the important language benefits, were, what is it? It's learner-centered. So it's all coming from them. Going back to the Thornbury quote of the point of need, it's what they need to communicate about their day. We're not telling them practice this grammar point. Increases individual time with learners. We get to see what they've been doing each day. We get to see how they're explaining it, and it's not that often, especially with big classes, that you get to do that, I think. So we've both talked about that thing, especially in big classes, where if you have students that speak really quietly, in a very low voice, or perhaps are a bit shyer than others and don't necessarily contribute as much, you may not notice things that you would then notice in their writing, and we did pick up on some of those things. And the flip side is also true. I recently, a couple of days ago, read a diary from one of my level 4 students who's very, very, very quiet. I can barely hear her in the lesson. But she wrote this amazing, descriptive, elaborate diary where she'd thought about how she felt and described the paintings in the National Gallery really beautifully, and the Thames was glistening, and all this stuff, which was amazing, and I didn't know she could do that. So it highlights strengths as well that they're maybe not confident to show in class. And rapport, we think we have good rapport with students generally, but it may do something to enhance that, enhance the relationship with students. I've noticed if I've read something in a diary that I then bring up in class, if it's relevant to the context or the topic or whatever, say, oh, I remember I read in your diary that you did this. You can see that they like it, I think. We all like it if we've been listened to, and if people remember details that we've told them. So I think it's the same with the diary, they quite like that. And it comes to this thing of, it's like a conversation, they're kind of having a conversation with you on paper. And it's nice that we can reply to them on a one-to-one basis and have that connection with them. I think it helps with the atmosphere in the class.
Yeah, to read it as a person and not just a teacher that's marking the mistakes or the good things in it, but to actually notice them and bring them up is quite good.
Yes.
In terms of benefits for students from our point of view, this repeated practice, this was the whole thing, rewriting the same thing, and by repeating, hopefully improving as you go from day one of I woke or I wake up, I clean teeth and go out, and then you get, I woke up refreshed and brushed my teeth day by day. It's not like that. We also thought of this as being quite low risk in terms of making mistakes in front of peers. And that can be a thing, like you were talking about shyness sometimes. It could be that pronunciation is not great, so even though the student knows they've studied in the class, but the fellow student is not understanding what's going on, and it's very frustrating. But because they're writing to us, they know that we hopefully will understand most of the time what they're going on about, right? One or two sentences, you think? I don't know.
Question mark.
And also that it allows for more think time if you're doing it out of class. So you're setting up and then they can go home. They can spend as long as they like doing this. They can research words they need, etc. But it just gives them time to reflect on themselves, what they have done, and then use the language they can use.
Yeah. So looking things up, thinking about how to use them. We hope it encourages them to go out and search for words they don't understand, think, how do I say this as a verb or whatever, sort of very independently. Yeah, I mean, you'll see a quote from Sajid, our favourite student, in a minute. He talks about this, it did become part of his routine. So every day I have to think about what I'm going to say. So because they know they're going to have to write about it, it hopefully becomes part of their routine. Okay, what am I going to say in my diary later? And because they're doing this, hopefully they're thinking about how to say things in English. You know, when they're waiting for the tube, how do you say that in English? And they have to be perhaps more aware of what they've been doing, remember that particular painting in the gallery and what they thought about it, remember things people have said to them and how to relay that in English. Yeah, so hopefully it extends to their wider experience. Yes.
But of course, it's not just our opinion that we wanted to talk about, so we looked at some learner opinions as well. Now, if you look on the back of your handouts, you'll see quotes from various students that we interviewed about this and had little chats about. Just have a little look at them, maybe a small chat. We're going to be getting tight on time, so we'll be maybe 1 or 2 minutes, 1 minute. Just have a look through them and see if you think these are positive or negative responses. Just have a little look.
Yes. This is a typical thing for her. Yeah.
I don't say too many things.
It's so weird.
Okay, so of course we're going to start with the start of this presentation, naturally. If only he knew, yeah, we should tell him at some point. So yeah, obviously he quite likes it, and in fact recently he...
Yeah, he's in my class at the minute, and he came up to me after class and he's like, I think my writing's getting worse, I'm not writing my diary every day, because he did it with you a lot, and now he's not doing it. So he requested, he said, can I give you my diary to practice? So I think, you know, for him, he noticed an improvement, and he wants to do it again.
Yeah, and as we said earlier, he's actually aiming to do IELTS fairly soon. He's at quite a low IELTS score. So, but before he gets into academic writing, he just wants to get back into writing somehow. So I think that's good for him. With someone like Manuela, yeah, quite positive in this way. And this is at the point where we say, well, for the last week or so, 10 days, we tried a little experiment ourselves. We've been writing diaries in foreign languages. And having them checked by partners that speak languages much better than we do. So Italian and Spanish, very low level, that's fine. Fine. And I think we both kind of associate this, don't we?
Yes. Yeah, I found I really wanted to try and use different vocabulary. Oh, how can I say this? How can I say this more interestingly? So yes, I agree with Manuela. It's a good incentive to try to push yourself, I think.
Yeah, and the same with Berkham here, you know, this kind of improvement every day to push yourself. Maybe not so much the speaking for us, because we're not speaking our languages necessarily as well, writing them more, but this kind of, you know, improving. You go from making loads of mistakes, having them corrected, and the next day you're sort of flipping backwards and forwards to make sure you don't make them. And by day 3 or 4, you don't need to check back anymore on how to use that reflexive or how to use the past tense of that, because you're doing it so often. And yes, I'm just brushing my teeth every day, but I'm getting it right now. And then we get to things like this, like Zhenya. Is it positive or negative? I'm not sure. When I interviewed Zhenya here, very typical Russian, no intonation, didn't give anything away. You know, you must imagine, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, I just don't know. But she did it every day, which is a good thing, you know, and she did think of different ways of saying it. And again, with Luana, we think that the same thing. She was kind of into it to a certain extent. Every day, maybe not. Every other day, maybe better.
I think that's a positive thing, isn't it? Having to change the way to say the same thing. Because I found myself trying to do that, or maybe I should say on the way instead of on the way home instead of after work I did this. And it encourages you to expand in that way. Don't know if she was being positive.
But she definitely wasn't.
Okay.
I don't think in this one here, it's just kind of here. Really,
this one, yeah.
Yeah, kind of hard, I don't have too many things to say. But actually what was interesting about this student is her speaking improved, because I said, okay, that's fine. She again was working here, she worked very long hours, she studied English, she did homework, she went to sleep. She worked long hours, she studied, it's repetitive. She didn't have much to say. So I said, we kind of got into that and said, well, when you're doing something I didn't use the word mundane with her, but when you're doing the same thing, it's very normal if someone says, what did you do this weekend? You say, nothing much, I just, da 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 da. So that used of just to introduce the normality of life. So she's still got something to write and practice, even if it's quite dull for her to do, to relate her life that's not particularly thrilling at the moment. So that brings us on to kind of what we're thinking about going forward, because I think we're both into it now, and I know there's some other teachers here at OHC that have started using diaries, here, which is a good thing, we think. So, yeah, we were talking about maybe taking some really good examples from student work, sharing them, obviously without names, and just saying, look at this language. So language we think would be useful for everyone, and sharing it with the class, maybe once a week, something like that.
Yeah, and this is something I have done in the past, and perhaps do it as a game, do it as a competition, they work in groups, find the errors, and do it like that, like an auction or a race or something. Common errors that we think would be useful for everybody to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I thought this might be a good idea, because the kind of things we write in our diary, the kind of things we talk about. We like talking about these everyday things, the weather, how we got to work and stuff like that. Makes up a lot of our conversation, I think. So I think maybe if you encourage students to check with you if there's something they don't know how to pronounce, and then go home and just read it aloud to themselves, to familiarise themselves with how to say it, and perhaps record themselves. They could play the recording for you and correct it and do it again, perhaps. I think that's a nice way to segue into speaking practice.
Mm-hmm. And again, of course, the use of online diaries. I'm not sure that this would work necessarily here if we're doing a daily thing, but if you're seeing students once or twice a week, or more long distance or something, that could work as well, when you can respond to them in a different way. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe. These
They
are all
like
things we're
using
going to
things,
think.
they like doing stuff online, so it might motivate them more to actually do it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Blogs and all that kind of stuff there. So really that brings, oh no, there was one more. Sorry, scrapbooks, yes. Ooh.
Probably, I'm sure a lot of you have very creative students, some creative students in your class. You see them doodling and things during the lessons. So I thought that might be a nice idea. They can, make it an artistic project, design the front cover, perhaps stick tickets in there that they've bought in London, and describe the show that they went to. And you said perhaps for the closed groups that we have here sometimes, we have a closed group of teenagers from France, for example. It might be a nice thing for them to do as a group project to show their experience in London when they go back home. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, that does bring us more to the end of it. Bang on time, I think, which is good. So I think maybe if you have questions or comments, should we take one or two now, maybe? Or if anyone's got anything to say. Hopefully I answered maybe your question about style a little bit.
I was just thinking that when I write a diary, if I haven't got much space, I leave out the personal pronoun, and sometimes leave out the or a, went to dentist, but that's going to really confuse at the early stages. You wouldn't want to bring that in, would you? I wondered if you'd come across that at all. Abbreviated style for diaries when you haven't got much space.
I haven't yet.
No, I think because we've both done it with low levels as well, so that if they leave out that article,
Best to
it'll be an error.
avoid it, really.
Yeah, so I've not looked. That's a good point though, because we do that, don't we? We abbreviate,
Well, personally,
perhaps for higher levels.
Maybe for higher levels.
Yeah.
I guess if
There's
they're
note
taking it
form,
as a
isn't it?
record.
If you leave a note for someone, you could use that style.
Sure, absolutely.
I think it's higher levels, you're right.
Yeah, I think so, because you might confuse them at lower levels. And think, oh, I don't have to use that article
Yeah,
at all.
it's fatal actually. I
So,
think.
yeah.
Answering my own question.
Did you set it as a sort of optional thing, or it was like homework? And what were the repercussions? I mean, these are adult students, so did you find that most people did
Yeah.
did do it.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I did.
It's a great opportunity for them. I
Yeah,
think.
even when it was homework,
A service.
they did do it.
Okay.
We very often get feedback that students feel that they don't do enough writing in
Yeah,
class.
yeah,
So
yeah.
by doing this, they know that they're doing it, whether they're doing it in class or they're doing it for homework. So we kind of, I think, mostly positive on that.
Yeah, sometimes it's a bit awkward on a Monday if they hadn't done it. And
Yeah.
I wanted them to talk about the weekend, but then they could still talk about it,
True.
perhaps a bit less confidently. But yeah, most of the time, surprisingly, they did do it. Maybe because they get the regular the quick feedback. Maybe.
Have you thought about exploring other areas rather than just quite mundane habits and things they've done? So, other things they could be writing about regularly?
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, it's a freer task, so they can write whatever they want. And like we've experimented, and I have for sure, with asking various questions of what they want to do, whether it's about things they've done way back in the past or things they're planning to do in the future. So it's almost like daily writing as opposed to a daily diary. And it worked to a certain extent in that case. But it was a bit more difficult because of the abstract nature of it. It was more difficult for me to understand what they were trying to convey sometimes. It was more difficult to mark or to help them with. And some of them just didn't get it. They were like, oh, I'm supposed to write here. Anyways.
I think perhaps in terms of, we've both tried sort of writing little prompt questions when we're giving feedback, if they've not written that much, or they've only written about the mundane, to kind of prompt them to extend, like, what did you think of the movie? Have you seen movies like that before? How does it compare to your experience of this? Sort of, because sometimes they don't know how to expand on it. So little prompt questions like that to elaborate the diary, rather than it being, like you say, an abstract thing to talk about. But no, I haven't tried it with other things, but
It's like got a little potential.
Yeah, that's what we think. I mean, that's why if anyone's interested in doing more diaries or daily writing or any of this, we're very willing to share the slides. Obviously, both of our email addresses are up here. So please get in contact if you do something, if you experiment in a different way, because I think we're both fascinated to know how it works in other classrooms, how it works in classes that are not every day, higher levels. I'm really interested to know how this will work. So please do get in touch. But I think for now, we will leave it there, if that's all right. Thank you very much.